Evan Mercer stood frozen in the cafe doorway, watching the woman at table 7, the blind date he'd agreed to just to shut Cal up, sit beside a sleek wheelchair with the kind of quiet confidence that made his chest tighten. She wasn't waiting to be pitied. She wasn't performing bravery. She was just there. And in that single moment, before he even crossed the threshold, Evan realized that every assumption he'd carried into this night was about to shatter. This wasn't going to be the awkward coffee he'd planned to escape. This was going to be the collision that rewrote everything. If you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you're already hooked, hit that like button and settle in, because what happens next isn't just about a carpenter and a stranger in a cafe. It's about what we see when we finally stop looking away. Part 1. The alarm clock screamed at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before Evan Mercer actually needed it to. He slapped it silent, anyway, the way he always did, and lay there in the dark of his studio apartment, staring at the ceiling he'd patched himself 2 months ago. The crack was still visible if you knew where to look. He knew where to look. By 5:15, he was out the door with a thermos of black coffee and a protein bar that tasted like optimistic cardboard. The streets of outer Portland were still empty, the kind of empty that felt like a secret you got to keep. Evan liked secrets. He liked mornings. He liked the way his truck rumbled to life on the third try, every single time, like a handshake between old friends. The framing site was 20 minutes east, a new development going up where there used to be fields. Evan didn't love what that meant, but he loved the work, the geometry of it, the way 2x4s became walls, became rooms, became places where people would laugh and fight and fall asleep. He liked being part of that. He just didn't like talking about it. "Yo, Mercer, you sleep in your truck again?" Cal Turner was already at the site, coffee in one hand, a breakfast burrito in the other, grinning like he'd invented morning itself. Cal was 28, 3 years older than Evan, and approximately 10,000 times louder. He wore his tool belt like a gunslinger and talked like someone who'd never met an opinion he didn't want to share. "No," Evan said, grabbing his gear from the truck bed. "You sure? Because you've got that 'I definitely slept in my truck' vibe." "I slept in my bed, Cal." "Alone?" Evan didn't answer, just shouldered his tool bag and headed toward the frame they'd started yesterday. Cal followed, because Cal always followed. "See, that's the problem, man. You're 25 and you're living like a monk. When's the last time you even talked to a woman who wasn't somebody's mom asking about permits?" "Last Tuesday," Evan said, leveling his first board. "Lady at the hardware store helped me find deck screws." Cal groaned. "That doesn't count. You didn't specify criteria." "I'm specifying now. I'm talking about a woman you actually want to talk to. You know, dating, human connection, the thing normal people do." Evan lined up his drill, sank the screw in 3 clean bursts. "I connect fine." "With lumber, yeah. With humans?" "Jury's out." They worked in relative peace for an hour, which by Cal standards meant he only interrupted Evan's focus 6 or 7 times. The sun came up slow and orange, the way it did out here with nothing to block it, and Evan fell into the rhythm he loved: measure, cut, place, fasten. Repeat. The world made sense when you built it one piece at a time. "Seriously, though," Cal said around 10, wiping sweat from his forehead. "My cousin's got a friend, graphic designer, drinks oat milk, does yoga, laughs at dumb jokes. I could set something up." "No thanks. Come on, 1 coffee, 1 hour. If it's awful, I'll leave you alone for a month." Evan paused mid-swing with his hammer. "A month?" "Scout's honor." "You were never a scout. Spiritual scout's honor." Evan considered this. A month of peace sounded pretty good. A month without Cal narrating his romantic failings every morning before the drywall went up sounded even better. And coffee. Coffee was just coffee. 1 hour. He could survive 1 hour. "Fine," Evan said. Cal's face lit up like Christmas. "Seriously?" 1 hour. Then you leave me alone." "Done. I'll text you the details." Cal clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to rattle his bones. "This is good, man. This is growth." Evan went back to hammering, already regretting everything. The cafe Cal picked was called Rooted, which Evan found both annoyingly on-brand and kind of nice. It had big windows, wooden tables that looked like someone's uncle had made them, and a chalkboard menu that featured at least 4 drinks with lavender in them. Evan arrived 7 minutes early because he arrived everywhere 7 minutes early, ordered a black coffee because he didn't know what a cortado was, and sat at a table near the window where he could see the door. His phone buzzed. Cal. She's cool, I promise. Brown hair, probably wearing something artsy. Name's Mara. Do not blow this. Evan typed back, I'll try not to spontaneously combust. Cal. That's the spirit. At exactly 6 p.m., the door opened, and Evan's first thought was that Cal's definition of artsy was apparently a vintage denim jacket over a white t-shirt and jeans that looked lived in a way that probably cost money. His second thought was that she was moving toward him with a calm, assessing expression that suggested she was just as skeptical about this whole thing as he was. His third thought arrived when she stopped beside the table, and he saw the wheelchair. Sleek, modern, minimal, the kind of design that didn't apologize for existing. She sat beside it, not in it, which took Evan a second to process. She'd walked in under her own power, slowly, carefully, and now she was lowering herself into the chair across from him with the controlled grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times and didn't need commentary. Evan? She said. Yeah, hi. Mara? That's me. She set a small leather bag on the table, met his eyes directly. So, Cal's your work friend? Unfortunately. The corner of her mouth ticked up. He told me you were super chill but weird about eye contact. Direct quote. Evan felt his face heat. That's actually accurate. Good to know. She glanced toward the counter. I'm going to get tea. Do you need anything, or are you committed to that coffee? I'm good. She nodded, rose from the chair, and walked to the counter with the same careful gait, steady, deliberate, like she was negotiating with gravity. Evan watched without trying to watch, then looked away, then felt stupid for looking away, then looked at his coffee like it held answers. When she came back with an iced tea, peach from the looks of it, she caught him staring at the table like it might grow teeth. Relax, she said, sitting again. I'm not going to quiz you. Sorry, I just don't know what to say without sounding like an idiot. Yeah. Then don't say anything. She took a sip of her tea, set it down with a soft clink. Or say something idiotic. I'm not grading you. Evan exhaled. Okay. Okay. They sat there for a moment, and it wasn't quite comfortable, but it wasn't awful either. Outside, a couple walked past the window holding hands. Inside, the espresso machine hissed, and someone laughed too loud at their own joke. So, Mara said eventually. Carpenter? Framing, mostly. Residential stuff. Do you like it? Evan considered. Yeah, I don't know, it makes sense. You measure, you cut, you build. If you do it right, it works. If you don't, it doesn't. It's honest. Mara tilted her head slightly. That's a good answer. What do you do? I illustrate children's books. Seriously? Why, do I not look like someone who draws talking bears? No, that's cool. That's really cool. She smiled, and it was the first real smile he'd seen from her. It pays the bills sometimes, when publishers remember I exist. Do you freelance, or mostly freelance? I had a contract gig for a while, but it ended last year. Now I'm hustling. She traced a finger along the rim of her glass. It's fine. I like the flexibility. And I don't have to wear pants to meetings. Evan laughed before he could stop himself. Mara's smile widened. See? You're not so weird about eye contact. Give it time. They talked for another 20 minutes. Easy things, surface things, favorite books, worst jobs, whether iced coffee was morally superior to hot coffee. Mara had opinions, sharp ones, but she delivered them with enough dry humor that Evan couldn't tell if she was serious or testing him. Probably both. At some point, the conversation lulled, and Mara glanced toward the window. Can I ask you something? Sure. Are you doing this because Cal wouldn't shut up, or because you actually wanted to? Evan opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Honestly, The first one. But now, I don't know. This is better than I thought it would be. Mara studied him for a long moment. That's also a good answer. Are you doing this because Cal wouldn't shut up? His cousin wouldn't shut up. But yeah, same deal. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed loosely. I don't really date. People get weird. Weird how? They either treat me like I'm inspirational, wow, you're so brave, or they treat me like I'm fragile, like I might shatter if they say the wrong thing. Either way, it's exhausting. Evan nodded slowly. For the record, I don't think you're inspirational. Mara blinked, then she laughed, a real laugh, the kind that sounded surprised. Wow, okay. I mean, not that you're not, I just mean I don't know you well enough to… Evan stopped, rubbed his face. I'm bad at this. No, you're not. You're just honest. She finished her tea, set the empty glass aside. I like that. Yeah? Yeah. She glanced at her phone, frowned slightly. I should probably go. Early morning tomorrow. Okay. They stood, Mara slower but not struggling, just methodical, and walked toward the door together. Outside, the evening had cooled into something soft and blue, the kind of light that made everything look kinder than it was. Mara paused on the sidewalk, adjusted the bag on her shoulder. So, do you want to do this again? Evan felt something settle in his chest, warm and tentative. Yeah, I do. Good. She pulled out her phone, handed it to him. Put your number in. He did, fingers clumsy on the screen, and handed it back. She sent him a text immediately, just a period so he'd have her contact, and pocketed the phone. Saturday, she said. There's a park near my place. Laurelhurst. You know it? I can find it. Meet me by the pond, 2:00. Okay. She turned to go, then stopped, looked back. And Evan? Yeah? Don't get weird between now and then. I'll try. Mara smiled, a smaller one this time, almost private, and walked away down the sidewalk. Evan watched her go, the careful rhythm of her steps, the way she didn't look back, and felt like he'd just stepped off a ledge he hadn't known was there. When he got back to his truck, his phone buzzed. Cal. How did it go? Evan stared at the message for a long moment, then typed. Good. Cal. That's it? Just good? Evan smiled despite himself. Yeah, just good. He drove home through streets that felt less empty than they had that morning, parked in his usual spot, and climbed the stairs to his studio. The crack in the ceiling was still there, but when he lay down and closed his eyes, he didn't see it. He saw Mara's smile, sharp and surprised, and the way she'd said his name like she was deciding whether it fit him. It felt like the beginning of something he didn't have words for yet. Saturday came with the kind of weather that couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Clouds, then sun, then clouds again. Evan showed up at Laurelhurst Park at 1:53 p.m., which meant he'd been circling the block for 10 minutes trying not to look like a stalker. The park was busy. Families with dogs, joggers with expensive headphones, a guy doing Tai Chi near a tree, like he was the main character of his own movie. Evan walked toward the pond, hands in his pockets, and found Mara already there. She sat on a bench facing the water, her wheelchair parked beside her, a sketchbook open on her lap. She was drawing something, her hand moving in quick, confident strokes, and she didn't look up when he approached. You're early, she said. You're earlier. I live close. You have less of an excuse. Evan sat down, left a respectful foot of space between them. What are you drawing? Mara tilted the sketchbook so he could see. A duck, rendered in clean black ink, looking vaguely annoyed. That one over there. He's judging everyone. Evan looked at the duck in question, who was indeed staring at a nearby toddler like the kid owed him money. That's accurate. I know. Mara went back to shading. I'm thinking about using him in a book. A duck who's tired of everyone's nonsense. I'd read that. You're saying that to be nice. I don't really say things to be nice. Mara glanced at him, something flickering in her expression. Amusement, maybe, or reassessment. No, I guess you don't. They sat in silence for a while, watching the ducks navigate their small dramas. A breeze came through, ruffling the water, and Evan felt the tightness in his shoulders start to ease. This was easier than the cafe, less pressure, just two people sitting on a bench, not performing anything. "So," Mara said eventually, closing her sketchbook. "Tell me something true." "About what?" "Anything. Just something real." Evan thought about it. "I don't really have friends. I mean, I have Cal, but he kind of forced his way in. Mostly I just work. Go home. Repeat. Do you like it that way?" "I don't know. It's quiet." "Quiet's good," Mara said. "Underrated, honestly." "What about you?" "What about me?" "Do you have friends?" Mara smiled faintly. "A few. My cousin, mostly. Some people from college I see once a year and pretend I'm doing better than I am. The usual." "Are you doing better than you are?" "Aren't we all?" She stretched her legs out, winced slightly, then adjusted. "I've got cerebral palsy, spastic diplegia, if you want the technical term. It affects my legs, mostly. Some days are better than others. Today's a medium day." Evan nodded. He didn't say he was sorry. He didn't say she was brave. He just said, "Thanks for telling me." Mara looked at him for a long moment. "You're really not going to make a thing of it, are you?" "Should I?" "No, but most people do." "I'm not most people." "No," Mara said quietly. "I'm starting to get that." They stayed at the park for 2 hours. Mara showed him more sketches, a series of grumpy animals, a half-finished landscape, some character studies for a book she was pitching. Evan told her about the house he was working on, how the owner kept changing his mind about window placement, how Cal had accidentally nailed his own sleeve to a stud last week. It was easy. Easier than Evan had expected anything to be. When the sun started to dip and the air turned cooler, Mara packed up her sketchbook and stood, steadying herself with one hand on the bench. Evan stood too, instinctively reaching out, then catching himself. "I'm good," Mara said, but her tone wasn't sharp. Just factual. "Okay." They walked back toward the parking lot, slow and unhurried. Mara moved beside him at her own pace, and Evan matched it without thinking. When they reached her car, a small blue sedan with a handicap placard hanging from the mirror, she turned to face him. "Same time next week?" she asked. "Yeah, definitely." "Good." She unlocked her door, then paused. "And Evan?" "Yeah?" "You're doing fine, just so you know." Evan felt warmth spread through his chest, unexpected and settling. "You too." Mara smiled, got into her car, and drove away. Evan stood in the parking lot for a minute longer, watching the space where she'd been, and felt like he was holding something fragile and important that he didn't want to drop. Well, the weeks stacked into a routine, the kind that snuck up on you and suddenly felt essential. Saturdays at Laurelhurst. 2 o'clock. Iced peach tea for Mara, black coffee for Evan, even though he'd started branching out to other things just to see her reaction when he ordered a lavender latte. "You're really committing to this, huh?" she'd said. "It's not bad." "You're lying." "Yeah." They sat on the same bench every time, and Evan started thinking of it as theirs, even though that was probably presumptuous. Mara brought her sketchbook. Evan brought nothing, just himself, and somehow that felt like enough. They talked about small things and big things and the things in between. Mara told him about growing up with parents who meant well but worried too much, who'd wrapped her in so much protection she'd nearly suffocated. Evan told her about his mom, who'd raised him alone after his dad left, who'd worked 2 jobs and still made it to his middle school concerts even though he'd only played the tambourine. "Where is she now?" Mara asked. "Arizona. Retired. Has a boyfriend who teaches pickleball." "That's very Arizona." "Yeah." Mara drew while they talked, her hand moving across the page in rhythms Evan was starting to recognize. Quick when she was amused, slower when she was thinking. Sometimes she'd show him what she'd drawn. Sometimes she wouldn't. Evan never asked. One Saturday in early October, the weather turned cold enough that they both showed up in jackets. Mara had a green one, oversized and soft-looking, and Evan caught himself wanting to know if it was as soft as it seemed. "You're staring," Mara said without looking up from her sketch. "Sorry." "I didn't say stop." Evan's heart did something complicated. "What are you drawing?" Mara turned the sketchbook around. It was him, or a version of him. Sitting on the bench, looking out at the pond, his profile rendered in careful, observant lines. He looked peaceful, like someone who belonged there. "Is that how I look?" Evan asked. "Sometimes." Mara studied the drawing, then him. "You have a good face, not too complicated." "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation." She closed the sketchbook, set it aside. "But yeah, it's a compliment." They sat in the kind of silence that didn't need filling, and Evan thought about how weird it was that this, just sitting next to someone, could feel like the most important part of his week. "Can I ask you something?" Mara said eventually. "Sure." "Why did you actually say yes to that coffee?" "Not the Cal excuse, the real reason." Evan thought about it, about how to shape the truth into something that didn't sound stupid. "I think I was tired of everything being the same. I didn't know I was tired of it until Cal asked, but I was. And I thought, what's the worst that could happen? And? And you weren't the worst thing. You were—" He stopped, searching for words. "You were different, but not in a scary way. In a good way." Mara looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "You're going to make me like you, Evan Mercer. Is that a bad thing?" "I don't know yet." But when she smiled, it didn't feel like she was afraid of finding out. By mid-October, they had expanded beyond the park. Coffee shops. A bookstore where Mara spent 40 minutes in the graphic novel section and came out with 3 purchases she definitely didn't need. A quiet restaurant where they shared fries and argued about whether ketchup belonged on eggs. "It's a crime against breakfast," Mara said. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being correct." Evan stole one of her fries. "Agree to disagree." "That's what people say when they know they're wrong." People stared sometimes. Not always, not everywhere, but enough that Evan started noticing. The quick glances, the double takes, the way some people's expressions shifted into something performative and kind, like they were auditioning for a role in their own heads. Mara noticed too. Evan could tell by the way her jaw tightened, the way her responses got a little sharper. But she never said anything, and Evan didn't know if bringing it up would help or just make it worse. One night in late October, they went to a small outdoor concert in a park downtown. Local band, nothing fancy, just acoustic guitars and a guy with a harmonica who was trying really hard. They found a spot on the grass, Mara in her chair, Evan sitting cross-legged beside her. The music was good. The night was cool and clear. Everything should have been fine. But Evan felt Mara tense beside him before he understood why. He followed her gaze and saw a woman, maybe 40, well-dressed, smiling, walking toward them with the kind of purpose that meant she was about to say something. "Excuse me," the woman said, stopping in front of Mara. "I just wanted to say, you're such an inspiration, really. The way you're out here living your life. It's just beautiful." Mara's expression went very still. "Thank you." "No, really. I always tell my kids, when they complain about things, I say, look at people like you. You don't let anything stop you. It's amazing." "Great, thanks." The woman smiled wider, like she'd done a good deed, and walked away. Evan watched her go, then looked at Mara, whose hands were clenched in her lap. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Fine." But she wasn't fine. Evan could see it in the rigid line of her shoulders, the way she wouldn't meet his eyes. The music kept playing, but Mara wasn't hearing it anymore. 20 minutes later, she turned to him. "I need to go." "Okay, I'll walk you." "No, I just need to go. Alone." Evan's stomach dropped. "Did I do something?" "No, you didn't. I just—" She stopped, shook her head. "I can't do this right now." She left before he could respond, moving through the crowd with quick, uneven steps, and Evan sat there on the grass, feeling like he'd just watched something fragile crack in half. He texted her that night. "Are you okay?" No response. He texted her the next day. "I'm here if you want to talk." Nothing. By the 3rd day, Evan stopped texting. He went to work, framed walls, listened to Cal's running commentary on life and football, and whether Evan had finally locked it down with Mara. He didn't answer. He went home, stared at the ceiling, and felt the silence press down on him in ways it never had before. On the 10th day, he grabbed his sketchbook. The one he'd bought on impulse after watching Mara draw. The one he'd barely touched because he didn't know what he was doing, and drew her. It wasn't good. The proportions were wrong, the shading clumsy. But he drew her the way he remembered her, sitting on the bench, looking out at the pond, her expression calm and a little distant, like she was seeing something he couldn't. He tore the page out carefully, folded it, and drove to the address he'd glimpsed once on her phone when she'd shown him a photo. He didn't knock. He just slipped the drawing into her mailbox and left. Then he went home and waited. Part 1. Lưu ý, viết 6.655 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ. Phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ ba, giữ độ kịch tính không viết lan man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document 1143. Pierce, hi. The mailbox felt like a confessional. Even stood there on Mara's street, a quiet residential block with old maples dropping their leaves in slow motion, and wondered if he'd just made everything worse. The drawing was terrible. He knew it was terrible. But it was the only thing he had that felt true. The only way he could say I'm still here without actually saying it. He drove away before he could change his mind, before someone saw him lingering like a creep, and spent the rest of the day at the framing site moving through motions that felt mechanical and distant. Cal asked him twice if he was okay. Evan said yes both times. Cal didn't believe him either time, but had the grace to let it go. That night, Evan lay in bed staring at his phone like it might spontaneously generate a message through sheer force of will. It didn't. The silence stretched and twisted, and somewhere around midnight he accepted that this might just be how it ended. Not with an explanation, not with closure, just with absence. He fell asleep thinking about the way Mara had looked at the concert, the tightness in her jaw, the way she'd left without letting him follow, like she was protecting him from something, or protecting herself. The next morning, Evan woke to find an envelope wedged under his apartment door. No name, no return address. Just a standard white envelope, slightly bent at the corner. He picked it up with hands that felt clumsy and foreign, carried it to his small kitchen table, and opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper, heavier stock, the kind artists used, folded once. Evan unfolded it and felt his breath catch. It was him, drawn in the same confident ink lines he'd watched Mara create a dozen times, but this was different. This wasn't a quick sketch at the park. This was deliberate, detailed, intimate. He sat on their bench, his profile turned toward the pond, but there was something in the rendering, the slight downward tilt of his head, the relaxed set of his shoulders, that made him look like he belonged exactly where he was, like he was waiting for something and didn't mind the wait. At the bottom, in small, precise letters, she'd written, "You didn't disappear." Evan read it 3 times. 4. Then he grabbed his keys and ran. Laurelhurst Park was 15 minutes away if you obeyed traffic laws. Evan made it in 11. He parked haphazardly, didn't bother locking the truck, and half walked, half jogged toward the pond with his heart doing something arrhythmic and wild in his chest. She was there. Mara sat on their bench in the mid-morning light, her wheelchair beside her, her hands folded in her lap like she'd been waiting, like she'd known he would come. When she saw him approaching, something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe, or fear, or both. Evan slowed as he got closer, suddenly aware that he was breathing hard, that he probably looked unhinged. "Hi." "Hi." Mara's voice was quiet, careful. "You got my drawing?" "Yeah, He gestured vaguely, words failing. "Yeah." "Sit?" Evan sat, leaving the same foot of space he always did, even though right now it felt like a canyon. The ducks were doing their thing on the pond. A jogger passed behind them. The world kept moving like nothing had shifted, even though everything had. "I'm sorry," Mara said. She was looking at the water, not at him. "For disappearing. For not answering your texts. For being... You don't have to apologize." "Yes, I do." She finally turned to face him, and Evan saw exhaustion in her eyes, the kind that didn't come from lack of sleep. I do this sometimes. When things get too much, I just vanish. It's not fair to you. What got too much? Mara laughed, but it was hollow. Everything. That woman at the concert, the staring, the whole performance of existing in public with you. With me specifically, or not you, not because of you. She rubbed her face with both hands, a gesture that made her seem younger and more tired all at once. It's just, when I'm alone, I'm just me. When I'm with someone, I become a thing people react to. They either treat me like I'm made of glass or like I'm some kind of motivational poster. And I thought I could handle it, but that night I just couldn't. Evan absorbed this, turned it over. What about the drawing? The one you made of me? What about it? You wrote that I didn't disappear, but you did. Mara was quiet for a long moment. I know, that's why I drew it, because I realized... She stopped, started again. I disappeared. But you didn't. You didn't text me 50 times demanding answers. You didn't show up at my door. You just left me space. And then you put that terrible drawing in my mailbox. It was pretty bad, Evan admitted. It was awful. Mara smiled slightly. But it was also perfect, because you drew me the way you see me, just sitting there, not inspiring anyone, not being brave, just existing. That's all I've ever seen. I know, that's the problem. Evan frowned. How is that a problem? Mara turned to face him fully now, and there was something raw in her expression that made Evan's chest tighten. Because I've spent most of my life feeling like I have to audition just to be treated like a person. And you walked into that cafe and just didn't. You didn't audition either. You were just yourself. And that scared me, because what if I get used to that? What if I get used to someone seeing me instead of my chair, and then it goes away? It won't go away. You can't promise that. No, Evan said. But I can show up. I can keep showing up. That's the only promise I know how to keep. Mara's eyes went bright, and she looked away quickly, blinking hard. That's not a small promise, Evan. I know. They sat in silence, and this time it wasn't comfortable. It was loaded with all the things they weren't saying, all the ways this could go wrong, all the vulnerability of admitting that maybe this mattered more than either of them had planned. Finally, Mara spoke. I don't know if I'm good at this. Letting people in. I'm better at keeping things simple, keeping distance. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What else do you want me to say? Mara laughed, and this time it sounded almost real. I don't know. Most people would argue. Try to convince me I'm wrong. Are you wrong? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. She picked at a thread on her jacket. But I'm tired of erasing myself just because other people are uncomfortable. And I'm tired of testing people to see if they'll stay. I want to exist without it being a whole thing. Then exist, Evan said simply. I'll be here. Mara looked at him for a long time, searching his face for something. Doubt, maybe, or pity, or the kind of martyrdom that wore people down. Whatever she was looking for, she didn't seem to find it. Instead, her shoulders dropped slightly, and she exhaled. Okay. 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 She reached over and after a brief hesitation, took his hand. Her palm was warm, her grip firm. But we're doing this my way. No pressure, no timeline, just Saturdays, just this. Evan looked down at their joined hands, feeling the simple weight of her fingers against his, and nodded. Just this. And if I disappear again, I'll wait. That's not fair to you. Let me decide what's fair to me. Mara's grip tightened slightly. You're kind of infuriating, you know that? I've been told. They sat like that for a while, hands linked, watching the ducks navigate their small dramas. Eventually, Mara let go and pulled out her sketchbook, flipping to a blank page. Evan watched her draw, quick lines, confident strokes, the familiar rhythm he'd missed more than he'd realized. What are you drawing? He asked. Nothing yet. Just shapes? She glanced at him. Want to learn? I'm terrible at it. I saw your drawing, remember? I'm aware. She tore out a fresh page, handed it to him along with a pencil. Start with something simple. That tree over there. Evan looked at the tree, a big oak with branches that twisted in ways that seemed deliberately complicated, and back at the blank page. That's not simple. Sure it is. You're just overthinking it. Look at the basic shape first. Don't worry about details. Easy for you to say. It is easy for me to say. That's why I'm saying it. Mara shifted closer, until their shoulders were almost touching. Here, like this. She guided his hand, showing him how to break the tree down into simpler forms, how to see the structure beneath the chaos. Her hand was warm over his, her voice patient, and Evan found himself relaxing into the lesson even though his tree looked like something a kindergartner would pity. There, Mara said after a few minutes. See? It's a tree. It's a very sad tree. All trees are sad if you think about it long enough. They're stuck in one place their whole lives. That's dark. I contain multitudes. She released his hand, studied his sketch with exaggerated seriousness. This is going on my fridge. You don't have to do that. I'm absolutely doing that. This is peak outsider art. Collectors will fight over it someday. Evan felt warmth spread through his chest, easy and unexpected. You're making fun of me. Little bit? Mara smiled, and it was the smile he remembered from the cafe, sharp and surprised and real. But I missed this. Missed you. Yeah? Yeah. They stayed at the park until early afternoon, drawing and talking and not talking. At some point, Mara mentioned she was hungry, and they walked to a small Vietnamese place 2 blocks away that she promised made the best banh mi in Portland. The walk took longer than it would have if Evan had been alone, but he matched her pace without thinking about it, and Mara didn't comment on the adjustment. The restaurant was narrow and bright, with mismatched chairs and a menu written in chalk on the wall. They ordered at the counter, lemongrass chicken for Mara, grilled pork for Evan, and sat at a small table by the window. My cousin introduced me to this place, Mara said, tearing into her sandwich. She's been trying to get me out of my apartment more. Says I'm becoming feral. Are you? Probably. I talked to my houseplant for 20 minutes last week. What did it say? Nothing. It's a terrible conversationalist. Evan bit into his banh mi and had to admit it was objectively perfect. Crispy bread, the right ratio of pickle to meat, cilantro that tasted like something grown with intent. Your cousin's right. This is good. I know. I'm always right about food. Mara took another bite, then set the sandwich down. Can I ask you something? Sure. That drawing you left me, why did you draw me on the bench instead of, I don't know, anywhere else? Evan considered this. Because that's where you looked happiest. Or not happiest, but settled, like you were exactly where you wanted to be. Mara's expression shifted into something softer. That's a good answer. It's the truth. Those aren't always the same thing. They finished their sandwiches in comfortable quiet, and when they left the restaurant, the afternoon had turned golden, the light slanting through the trees in ways that made everything look intentional. They walked back toward the park, slowly, and when they reached Mara's car, she turned to face him. Same time next week? She asked. Yeah, definitely. Good. She paused, then stepped closer and hugged him, quick and firm, her arms around his shoulders, her chin tucked against his neck. Evan froze for half a second, then hugged her back, careful and sure. When she pulled away, she was smiling. Thanks for showing up, Evan Mercer. Thanks for letting me. Mara got into her car, and Evan watched her drive away, feeling like something had clicked into place, some piece of a puzzle he hadn't known he was building. The Saturdays continued, and with them came a rhythm that felt less like routine and more like architecture. Something they were building together, one careful piece at a time. Some weeks they stayed at the park. Other weeks they explored a used bookstore where Mara found a first edition of something she'd loved as a kid, a farmer's market where Evan bought her apples and she bought him honey, a small art gallery that was showing illustrations from local children's book artists. You should submit something, Evan said, studying a piece that featured a fox in a waistcoat. Maybe. Mara tilted her head, assessing. I'm working on something new. Might be ready by spring. What's it about? A girl who finds a door in her basement that leads to a garden where vegetables have opinions. Evan smiled. What kind of opinions? Strong ones. The tomatoes are particularly judgmental. Sounds perfect. November arrived with rain and wind and the kind of cold that made Evan grateful for his truck's heater, even if it only worked on the third highest setting. He and Mara started meeting at coffee shops more often, places with good heating and comfortable chairs, and Evan learned that Mara took her tea with honey and became unreasonably passionate about the correct way to brew it. You're telling me you just microwave water? She said one Saturday, looking genuinely distressed. It gets hot. That's the goal, right? Evan, no. No. She shook her head. We need to fix this immediately. The next week, she brought him a small electric kettle and a tin of loose-leaf tea. This is an intervention, she said seriously. I can't be associated with someone who microwaves tea water. Evan took the kettle with both hands like it was something sacred. This feels significant. It is. This is me investing in your future as a human being. He used the kettle that night in his apartment, following the instructions Mara had written on a note card in her precise slanted handwriting. The tea tasted better than anything he'd made before, and he texted her a photo of the mug. Evan, life-changing. Mara, I told you. Evan, you were right. Mara, say it again. Evan, you were right. Mara, one more time for the people in back. Evan smiled at his phone, alone in his apartment, and felt less alone than he had in years. In early December, Mara invited him to her apartment for the first time. It was a small one-bedroom in a building with an elevator that wheezed but worked, on a street lined with old houses that had been converted into duplexes and triplexes. She met him at the door, waved him in, and Evan stepped into a space that felt exactly like her. Books everywhere, on shelves stacked on the coffee table, piled beside the couch. Art on the walls, some of it hers, some of it clearly from artists she admired. A desk by the window covered in sketches and pencils, and a laptop surrounded by coffee mugs in various states of use. It was cluttered, but purposeful, lived in, comfortable. Sorry about the mess, Mara said, moving a stack of books off the couch so he could sit. It's not messy, it's... Evan searched for the word. It's you. Is that a compliment? Yeah. Mara smiled, settling into the armchair across from him. I'll take it. Want something to drink? I have tea, obviously. Also water. Also wine, but it's been open for like 2 weeks, so I can't vouch for its quality. Tea's good. While Mara made tea in the kitchen, a narrow galley space visible from the living room, Evan looked around, taking in details. A corkboard above her desk covered in sketches and notes and photos. One of the photos showed Mara with another woman, both of them laughing, arms slung around each other. The cousin, probably. That's Jenna, Mara called from the kitchen, like she'd sensed what he was looking at. My cousin, the one who keeps me from going full hermit. She looks like you. We get that a lot. Same terrible sense of humor, same inability to keep plants alive. Mara brought the tea over, 2 mugs, steam rising, and settled back into her chair, tucking her legs under her. Outside, rain started tapping against the windows, soft and steady. This is nice, Evan said. What is? This. Being here. Just... He gestured vaguely at the room, at her, at the space between them. This? Mara's expression softened. Yeah, it is. They talked for hours, the conversation drifting from topic to topic like water finding its path. Mara told him about the book she was working on, the vegetable garden one, and showed him early sketches. Evan told her about a house he'd framed last year, how the owners had invited him to the housewarming, and he'd gone even though it felt weird, how they'd told him the house felt solid in ways their last place hadn't. That must feel good, Mara said, knowing you built something that matters. Yeah, it does. Is that why you do it? The building? Evan thought about it. Partly. But also, I like that it's tangible. You can see what you've made. It either stands or it doesn't. There's no ambiguity. Must be nice. Art's all ambiguity. Mara traced the rim of her mug. You put something out there and hope people see what you meant, but they never do. Not exactly. They see their own thing. Is that bad? No, but it's lonely sometimes. Evan understood that. He understood the loneliness of making something and hoping it mattered, of working in silence and trusting the work would speak. He'd never thought of his framing that way, but maybe it was the same. Maybe all creation was just organized loneliness. For what it's worth, he said, I see what you're making, and it matters. Mara looked at him for a long moment, and something passed between them, something quiet and important that didn't need language. Thanks, Evan. Yeah. The rain kept falling, and they kept talking, and at some point Evan realized he didn't want to leave. Not because he needed anything to happen, but because this, sitting in Mara's cluttered apartment while rain blurred the windows, felt like exactly where he was supposed to be. When he finally left around 10, Mara walked him to the door, moving slowly through the familiar space of her home. At the threshold, she paused. You know, she said, I don't usually let people in here, into my space. Why'd you let me? Because you don't take up more room than you need, and because... She stopped, smiled slightly. Because I wanted to. Evan felt warmth bloom in his chest. I'm glad you did. Me too. He drove home through rain-slicked streets, the wipers beating steady rhythm, and thought about how strange it was that 6 months ago he'd been living a life that made perfect sense. Simple, quiet, contained, and now he couldn't imagine going back to it. Couldn't imagine Saturdays without Mara, couldn't imagine not knowing how she took her tea or what her apartment looked like, or the way she smiled when she was deciding whether to trust you. It wasn't love yet. He didn't know if it would ever be love, but it was something, and something felt like more than he'd ever expected to have. Winter settled over Portland with the determination of someone who planned to stay a while. The Saturdays moved indoors more often, coffee shops, Mara's apartment, once to a small movie theater that showed old films and sold popcorn with real butter. They saw a Miyazaki film, and afterward Mara talked for 20 minutes about the use of negative space in animation while Evan listened and watched the way her hands moved when she was excited about something. You're not bored? She asked eventually. No, keep going. You're sure? Because I can talk about this for hours. I know, that's fine. She smiled, ducked her head. Okay. They grabbed dinner at a ramen place after, small and warm and packed with people trying to escape the cold. The waitress brought them tea without asking, and they sat across from each other in the tiny booth, knees almost touching under the table. Can I tell you something? Mara said, stirring her broth. Always. I was really scared to let you in. After the concert, when I disappeared, I almost didn't come back. I almost just let it end. Evan's chest tightened. What changed your mind? Your terrible drawing. She smiled, but it was fragile. And the fact that you gave me space. Most people, when you push them away, they either disappear or they push back harder. You just waited. And that felt like maybe you were someone who wouldn't try to fix me. I don't want to fix you. I know, that's why I'm here. They finished their ramen in comfortable silence, and when they left the restaurant, the streets were slick with rain and light, reflections doubling everything. Evan walked Mara to her car, and at the driver's side door she turned to face him. Thank you, she said. For what? For showing up, for staying, for not making this weird. It is a little weird, Evan said honestly. Mara laughed. Okay, fair, but good weird. The kind of weird I can work with. Yeah, me too. She reached out, squeezed his hand once, and got into her car. Evan watched her drive away, then stood there on the wet sidewalk for a minute longer, feeling the rain start to fall harder, feeling like he'd just been trusted with something precious. When he got home, he made tea in the kettle Mara had given him, and sat at his small kitchen table thinking about how 6 months could remake a life. How you could wake up one day and realize that the silence you'd thought was peace was actually just waiting, and how sometimes the right person showed up and turned the waiting into something else entirely. His phone buzzed. Mara. Made it home. Thanks for tonight. Evan. Anytime. Mara. Careful. I might hold you to that. Evan. Good. Evan set the phone down, finished his tea, and went to bed thinking about Mara's smile, about the way she'd squeezed his hand, about all the Saturdays still ahead of them. Outside, the rain kept falling, washing the city clean, and Evan fell asleep feeling like maybe, finally, he was exactly where he needed to be. Part 3. Lưu ý. Viết 6 miền, 6 informal từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện, phá hồi thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ, phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan mạn, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document 1146. The morning came cold and bright, the kind of January day that felt scrubbed clean. Evan woke before his alarm again, made tea the way Mara had taught him, and sat at his kitchen table watching frost patterns on the window dissolve in the climbing sun. He had the day off, a rare Saturday where he didn't have to choose between work and Mara because work had chosen for him by not existing, and he'd already planned to spend it at the park, if the weather held. His phone buzzed at 8:30. Mara, want to do something different today? Evan, like what? Mara, there's a winter market downtown, food, art, the usual Portland stuff. Interested? Evan, yeah, what time? Mara, 11? I'll meet you at the Pioneer Courthouse Square entrance. Evan arrived at 10:50, which meant he spent 10 minutes pretending to examine a bronze statue he'd seen 100 times while actually watching for Mara. She showed up at 11 exactly, navigating the crowded square with the careful precision he'd come to recognize, her wheelchair folded and strapped to her back in a carrier that looked equal parts ingenious and uncomfortable. You're staring again, she said when she reached him. Sorry, that thing looks heavy. It's not bad, 12 pounds. I've carried worse. She adjusted the strap slightly. Plus, it means I can walk through the market instead of worrying about cobblestones and stairs and all the other things architects forgot to plan for. Makes sense. It does. Now come on, I want to hit the food stalls before the good stuff runs out. The market sprawled through several blocks, a temporary city of white tents and small wooden booths selling everything from hand-poured candles to artisan pickles to jewelry made from recycled bicycle chains. The air smelled like roasting nuts and coffee and something sweet Evan couldn't identify. People moved through the aisles in thick coats and scarves, their breath visible in the cold air, their voices blending into a pleasant hum. Mara led him straight to a booth selling fresh donuts, still warm, dusted with cinnamon sugar. She bought 4 without hesitation, 2 for now, 2 for later, and handed Evan one. Trust me, she said. He bit in and understood immediately. The donut was perfect, crisp outside, soft inside, the kind of thing that made you understand why people wrote poems about food. Okay, you were right. I'm keeping a tally. We're at what, 17 times now? At least. They wandered through the market eating their donuts, stopping whenever something caught Mara's eye. She spent 15 minutes at a booth selling vintage postcards, flipping through boxes with the focus of an archaeologist. Evan watched her sort through images, old beaches, mountains, cities that didn't exist anymore, and saw the way her expression shifted as she found ones she liked. What are you looking for? He asked. Nothing specific. I just like them. The idea that someone bought these to send to people they cared about, but they never got sent. Or they did, and then somehow ended up back in the world. She held up a postcard showing the Portland waterfront from the 1950s. There's something sad about it, but also kind of hopeful. How is that hopeful? Because they're still here, still waiting for someone to find them and give them purpose again. She looked at him, smiled slightly. I'm being pretentious, aren't I? Little bit, but I like it. Mara bought 5 postcards and tucked them into her bag like treasures. They moved on to a booth selling handmade scarves, then one with small paintings of Oregon landscapes, then one where a woman was demonstrating how to make paper from recycled denim. Mara watched the demonstration with complete attention, asking questions about pulp ratios and pressing techniques, and the woman lit up talking to someone who actually cared. You should try it, the woman said to Mara. I teach workshops on Thursdays. I might, Mara said, taking the woman's card. Thanks. As they walked away, Evan bumped her shoulder gently. You gonna take that class? Maybe. Depends on if I can fit it in around the vegetable book. She glanced at him. Would you want to come? They let people bring guests. To make paper? It's meditative. You'd probably like it. Evan thought about sitting in a room full of strangers pulping denim and wondered if that was true. But then he thought about sitting in a room with Mara while she did something she was excited about and decided it probably was. Okay. Yeah? Yeah. Mara's smile went soft and surprised, the way it always did when he agreed to something without hesitation. Good. They stopped at a coffee stand for hot cider, spiced with cinnamon and clove, warming their hands through the paper cups, and found a relatively quiet spot near a fountain that wasn't running because of the cold. Mara sat on the fountain's edge, and Evan sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched when the wind pushed them together. This is nice, Mara said. Different from the park, but nice. Yeah, more people, though. Does that bother you? Evan considered. 6 months ago, it would have. 6 months ago, he would have found the crowds overwhelming, would have counted down minutes until he could escape back to his truck and his silence. Now, with Mara beside him and cider warming his hands, it just felt like part of the landscape. Not really, not with you. Mara looked at him, something shifting in her expression. You say things like that and don't even realize you're doing it. Things like what? Sweet things. Honest things. She took a sip of her cider, looking out at the market. Most people perform sweetness. You just are. Evan didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They sat in comfortable silence, watching people move through the market with their bags and their children and their small dramas. A couple walked past holding hands, and Evan found himself noticing the easy way they moved together, the unconscious synchronization. Can I ask you something? Mara said after a while. Sure. What do you think this is? What we're doing? Evan's heart did something complicated. What do you mean? I mean, Mara set her cup down, folded her hands in her lap. We've been doing this for months now, these Saturdays. And I know we said no pressure, no timeline, but I keep wondering what you think is happening here. I think... Evan stopped, tried to find words that were true without being too much. I think I look forward to Saturdays more than any other day. I think when something happens during the week, you're the person I want to tell about it. I think this matters to me. But what is this? I don't know. Does it need a name? Mara was quiet for a moment. Maybe not, but I need to know if we're on the same page, because if you're just being nice, if this is just, I don't know, charity or friendship or... It's not charity, Evan said, more firmly than he'd said anything in a long time. And it's not just friendship, at least not for me. Then what is it for you? Evan looked at her directly, held her gaze even though it made his chest tight. It's the best part of my week. It's the thing I think about when I'm framing walls and trying not to listen to Cal. You're important to me, Mara. This is important to me. Mara's eyes went bright, and she blinked hard, looking away. Okay. Okay? Yeah, okay. She turned back to him, and there were tears on her lashes, but she was smiling. I just needed to hear you say it. I needed to know I wasn't making it up in my head. You're not making it up. Good. She reached over, took his hand, laced their fingers together. Her palm was cold from holding the cider cup, but her grip was sure. Because this is important to me too. You're important to me. Evan looked down at their joined hands, feeling the simple weight of her fingers against his, and felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't known was unsettled. So what do we call this? I don't know. Do we need to? Probably not. Then let's just keep doing what we're doing. Saturdays, showing up, being honest. She squeezed his hand, and maybe sometimes holding hands at winter markets. I can do that. They sat like that for a while longer, hands linked, shoulders touching, watching the market flow around them. Eventually they got up and wandered some more, still holding hands, and Evan noticed the way people looked at them, some with curiosity, some with something that might have been pity or admiration or both. Mara noticed too. He could tell by the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. But she didn't let go of his hand, and neither did he. They stopped at a booth selling old books, and Mara found an illustrated copy of a fairy tale collection from the 1920s. The illustrations were delicate and strange, full of elongated figures and dreamlike forests. She showed them to Evan, her excitement palpable. "Look at the line work," she said, tracing a finger above the page without touching it. "And the way they use negative space, it's so different from what we do now. You should get it. It's $40. So? So that's a lot for a book I'm just going to look at." "But you'll look at it a lot, right? So that's like, what, cents per look?" Mara laughed. "That's not how economics works. I'm a carpenter. What do I know about economics?" She bought the book. They walked to a quiet cafe at the edge of the market district, found a table in the back, and Mara went through the book page by page while Evan watched her face more than the illustrations. She looked happy. Not the careful, guarded version of happy she sometimes wore in public, but genuinely absorbed, present herself. "Thank you," she said without looking up. "For what?" "For making me buy the book, and for coming today, and for—" She closed the book, met his eyes. "For not being weird about the hand-holding thing." "Why would I be weird about it?" "Because some people would be. They'd worry about what it looked like, or they'd do it as a statement, like they were proving something. You just did it." "Because I wanted to." "I know." Mara's expression went soft. "That's what I mean." They stayed at the cafe until late afternoon, when the light started to turn golden and thin. Outside, the market was winding down, vendors packing up their unsold wares, the crowds thinning into something more manageable. They walked back toward the square slowly, Mara's pace careful on the uneven sidewalk, and Evan matched her rhythm without thinking about it. At her car, Mara turned to face him, the book tucked under her arm like something precious. "I had a really good day." "Me too." "We should do this more often. The different thing, I mean, not just the park." "Yeah, I'd like that." Mara shifted her weight, and for a second Evan thought she might hug him again. Instead, she stepped closer and kissed him on the cheek, quick and soft, her lips barely brushing his skin. Then she stepped back, smiling at his undoubtedly stunned expression. "See you next Saturday," she said. "Yeah, next Saturday." She got into her car and drove away, and Evan stood there on the sidewalk feeling the ghost of her kiss like a brand, warm and startling. He touched his cheek without meaning to, then felt ridiculous and dropped his hand. But the warmth stayed. When he got home, he made tea and sat at his kitchen table thinking about the way Mara had looked at the market, unguarded and present. Thinking about her hand in his, her kiss on his cheek, the way she'd said, "You're important to me," like it cost her something to admit. His phone buzzed. Mara. "I forgot to eat my second donut. Total waste." Evan. "Tragic." Mara. "We'll have to go back." Evan. "Sounds good." Mara. "Thanks for today, for real." Evan. "Anytime." And he meant it. The weeks that followed felt like something shifting, some subtle recalibration that neither of them named but both understood. The Saturdays continued, but they expanded. Dinner after the park, coffee before it, occasional texts during the week that weren't about logistics, but about small things. A funny sign Mara saw. A tree Evan was certain was growing sideways on purpose. The kind of messages that said, "I'm thinking about you," without having to say it. In late January, Portland got hit with a cold snap that turned the rain to sleet and made the morning commute treacherous. Evan showed up to the job site to find Cal already there, hands shoved in his pockets, breath clouding in the frigid air. "Boss says we're working inside today," Cal said, "finishing the drywall on the second floor." "Fine by me." They worked in relative warmth, the house's framing providing some shelter from the wind. Cal was unusually quiet for the first hour, which made Evan suspicious. Cal was never quiet unless he was planning something. "So," Cal said eventually, confirming Evan's suspicions. "You and Mara. What about us?" "You're still seeing her, right?" "Yeah." "Good, that's good." Cal measured a piece of drywall, marked it with his pencil. "She seems cool." "She is." "You happy?" Evan paused mid-cut, looked at Cal. "Yeah, I am." Good. You deserve that, man. Cal's expression was sincere, which was unsettling because Cal's expressions were usually sarcastic or hungry. I know I give you crap, but I'm glad you took that chance. You seem different. Different how? I don't know. Less. Cal gestured vaguely with his measuring tape. Less like you're trying to disappear. More like you're actually here. Evan absorbed this, turned it over. Thanks, Cal. Yeah, don't get emotional on me. We've got drywall to finish. They worked the rest of the day without much conversation, but Evan kept thinking about what Cal had said, about being present, about not disappearing. It was the same thing Mara had written on that drawing. You didn't disappear, and maybe that was the thing they were both learning. How to stay. How to be visible to each other without flinching. That Saturday, he met Mara at the park despite the cold. She'd texted him suggesting they skip it, meet at her place instead, but Evan had said he didn't mind the weather if she didn't, so they bundled up and sat on their bench with thermoses of hot chocolate and watched the pond ice over in patches. This is kind of miserable, Mara said, her breath visible in the air. Little bit. Why did you want to come here? Evan thought about it. Because it's ours. The bench. And I didn't want to skip it just because it's cold. Mara looked at him for a long moment, then scooted closer until their sides pressed together. You're ridiculous. I know. But sweet. I know that too. They sat like that, sharing warmth until the cold became genuinely unbearable. Then they went back to Mara's apartment where she made more hot chocolate and they sat on her couch with a blanket that had been hand-knitted by someone who clearly believed more was more. My aunt made this, Mara said, gesturing at the blanket's aggressive pattern. It's hideous but warm. It's not that bad. Evan, it's purple and orange and has tassels. Okay, it's pretty bad, Mara laughed, tucking herself into the corner of the couch with her legs folded under her. She had a new sketch she wanted to show him, more vegetables with opinions, this time a carrot who was disappointed in humanity's life choices. This is for the book? Evan asked. Yeah, I'm about halfway through the illustrations. My agent thinks we'll have a publisher by spring. That's amazing. It's terrifying. Mara set the sketchbook aside. What if people hate it? What if it's too weird? Then it's too weird, but it'll still be yours. That's not comforting. It's true, though. You made something that didn't exist before, that matters, even if people hate it. Mara studied him, her expression unreadable. How do you always say exactly the right thing? I don't. I just say what I think. That's what makes it right. They spent the rest of the afternoon like that, talking, not talking, existing in the comfortable space they'd built between them. At some point, Mara put on music, something instrumental and atmospheric, and Evan closed his eyes and just listened. When he opened them again, Mara was sketching him, her hand moving across the page in familiar rhythms. You're doing it again, he said. Doing what? Drawing me. You're a good subject. You sit still. She glanced up, smiled. Plus, I like your face. My face is pretty average. Not to me. Evan felt heat rise in his cheeks and looked away, which made Mara laugh softly. She went back to drawing, and Evan went back to watching her, and somewhere in that exchange was everything they hadn't said yet, but both understood. When evening came and Evan needed to leave, Mara walked him to the door. In the narrow hallway of her apartment, she stopped him with a hand on his arm. Can I ask you something? She said. Always. Where do you see this going? Us, I mean. Evan's heart picked up speed. I don't know. Where do you want it to go? I don't know either, but I know I don't want it to stop. She looked up at him, vulnerable in a way that made his chest ache. I know I want more Saturdays, and more weekdays, and more everything. Me too. Yeah? Yeah. Evan reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear without thinking. I want all of that. Mara leaned into his touch, just slightly, and the air between them felt charged with possibility. For a moment, Evan thought about kissing her. Really kissing her, not just receiving a kiss on the cheek, but before he could decide if that was the right move, Mara stepped back. Okay, she said softly. Good. Good. She smiled, opened the door for him. Drive safe. I will. Evan left feeling like he'd just stood at the edge of something significant, some threshold he and Mara were both approaching from different directions. It was exciting and terrifying in equal measure, and all the way home he thought about the way she'd leaned into his touch, the way she'd looked at him like he was someone worth keeping. February arrived with the promise of spring still distant but imaginable. The days grew incrementally longer, the rain less relentless. Evan and Mara fell into new patterns. Thursday night phone calls that lasted hours, Sunday morning texts, the occasional weekday coffee when their schedules aligned. The Saturdays remained sacred, but everything else filled in around them, until Evan realized with something like wonder that Mara wasn't just part of his week. She was woven into it. One Thursday night, lying in bed with his phone pressed to his ear, Evan listened to Mara talk about a frustrating call with her agent and realized he could listen to her talk about anything forever. "Am I boring you?" she asked eventually. "No, why?" "Because I've been complaining for 20 minutes. "I don't mind." "You're very patient." "Not really. I just like listening to you." There was a pause on the line, and when Mara spoke again, her voice was softer. "I like talking to you." "Good. Are you coming over Saturday? I was thinking we could try that new ramen place, the one near my apartment." "Yeah, that sounds good." "Okay." "Hey, Evan? Yeah?" "I'm glad we're doing this." Evan smiled in the darkness of his bedroom. "Me too." They talked for another hour, about nothing and everything, until Mara yawned and admitted she needed to sleep. Evan said goodnight and lay in the dark, thinking about how 6 months ago his Thursday nights had been silent, and now they were full of Mara's voice, her laugh, her presence even when she wasn't physically there. It felt like a small miracle. Saturday came, and they tried the ramen place, which lived up to its reputation. Afterward, they walked to a bookstore that stayed open late, and Mara spent an hour in the graphic novel section, while Evan browsed the architecture books and tried not to buy one about Japanese joinery that cost more than he wanted to admit. "Get it," Mara said when she found him still holding the book. "It's expensive." "So was my fairy tale book. You told me to get it." "That was different." "How?" Evan couldn't think of a good answer, so he bought the book. Mara grinned like she'd won something. Outside, the evening was clear and cold, stars visible between the buildings. They walked back toward Mara's apartment, their breath clouding in the air, and Evan found himself thinking about Cal's words. About being present. About not disappearing. At Mara's building, she turned to face him. "Want to come up? I made cookies earlier, and I can't eat them all myself." "What kind?" "Chocolate chip. The important kind." "Okay." Upstairs, Mara's apartment smelled like butter and sugar and something warm that made Evan's chest feel full. She brought out the cookies, slightly misshapen but golden and perfect, and they ate them on the couch while Mara told him about her cousin Jenna's latest dating disaster. "She matched with a guy on an app who turned out to be her dentist," Mara said, "like the actual person who cleans her teeth." "That's awkward, right? And now she has to find a new dentist because she can't go back." "That seems extreme." "You've never met Jenna. Everything is extreme." Mara reached for another cookie. "But she's good people. You'd like her." "Yeah." "Yeah. She's loud and doesn't filter anything and would probably interrogate you about your intentions, but you'd like her." Evan smiled. "Do I have intentions?" "Do you?" The question hung between them, weighted with all the things they'd been circling for months. Evan set his cookie down, looked at Mara directly. "Yeah," he said. "I do." "What kind of intentions?" "The kind where I want to keep doing this. Keep seeing you. Keep—" He stopped, searching for words. "I don't know how to say this without it sounding too much." "Just say it." "I care about you. A lot. More than I thought I would. More than I know how to handle sometimes." He met her eyes. "And I want to figure out what this is with you. Together." Mara's eyes went bright, and she set her own cookie down with careful precision. "Okay. Okay? Yeah, okay. I want that too." She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made Evan's heart do complicated things. "I think I've wanted that for a while now. I was just scared to say it." "Why?" "Because what if you didn't feel the same? What if I scared you away?" You couldn't. You don't know that. Yeah, I do. Evan reached over, took her hand. Mara, you're the best thing that's happened to me. Maybe ever. And I'm not going anywhere. A tear slipped down Mara's cheek and she wiped it away quickly, laughing. You can't just say things like that. Why not? Because it's too much, too good. She squeezed his hand. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. There's no other shoe. Promise? Promise. Mara looked at him for a long moment, then leaned forward and kissed him. Not on the cheek this time, but on the mouth, soft and tentative and perfect. Evan froze for half a second, then kissed her back, his hand coming up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. When they pulled apart, they were both breathing hard, and Mara's eyes were wide and bright. Was that okay? She asked. Yeah, very okay. Good, because I've wanted to do that for weeks. You could have. I was nervous. So was I. They sat there looking at each other, something fundamental shifting between them, and then Mara laughed and kissed him again, and Evan thought that this moment, this person, this improbable, beautiful thing they were building was worth every second of silence he'd lived through before finding it. Part 4. Louis. Viet 6000 6502 liên kết liên mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện và hội thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liên mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liên mạch với phần trước không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ. Phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, kết thúc phần không giới thiệu phần sau. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document 11. 10. They stayed on the couch for a long time after that, Mara tucked against Evan's side with his arm around her shoulders, both of them quiet in the way people are when they've just crossed a threshold they can't uncross. The cookies sat forgotten on the coffee table. Outside, the city hummed its familiar night song. Distant traffic, a siren blocks away. The rhythm of lives being lived in parallel. I should probably go, Evan said eventually, though he didn't move. You should, Mara agreed, also not moving. It's late. It is. They sat there another 10 minutes before Evan finally stood, reluctant and careful. Mara walked him to the door, and in the narrow hallway they kissed again, slower this time, like they were learning the shape of something new. Text me when you get home, Mara said. I will. And Evan? Yeah? This is real now, right? Like, we're actually doing this? Evan smiled, brushed his thumb across her cheek. Yeah, we're doing this. Okay, good. She kissed him once more, quick and soft. Drive safe. The drive home felt different somehow, the streets more vivid, the light sharper. Evan caught himself smiling at nothing, at everything, at the simple fact that Mara had kissed him and wanted to kiss him again. When he got to his apartment, he texted her immediately. Evan. Home safe. Mara. Good. Sleep well. Evan. You too. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the cracks still visible in the ambient light from the street, and thought about how strange it was that 8 months ago he'd been perfectly content with his quiet, solitary life. Now the thought of going back to that felt impossible. Mara had become essential, and Evan didn't know when exactly that had happened, probably gradually, like erosion, each Saturday wearing away at the walls he hadn't known he'd built. Sleep came slowly, and when it did, he dreamed about benches and sketches and the way Mara's hand felt in his. The weeks that followed had a different quality, something more settled and sure. They still did Saturdays, but now there were also Wednesdays and sometimes Tuesdays, quick dinners after work or coffee in the morning before Evan had to be on site. They texted constantly, the kind of ongoing conversation that picked up and dropped off without needing formal beginnings or endings. Mara sent him pictures of her vegetables with opinions illustrations as she finished them. Evan sent her photos of interesting joints he'd framed, the kind of thing only another person who cared about craft would understand. She always responded with enthusiasm that felt genuine, asking questions about load distribution and structural integrity that made Evan's explanations run long. You really care about this stuff, he'd said once, surprised. Of course I do. It's your thing. Why wouldn't I care? It was such a simple statement, but it lodged in Evan's chest and stayed there, warm and solid. In early March, Mara's agent called with news. The vegetable book had sold to a mid-sized publisher, advance enough to cover 3 months of rent, publication slated for the following spring. Mara called Evan immediately, her voice high and breathless with excitement. They bought it. They actually bought it. That's amazing. I'm so proud of you. I can't believe it. I mean, I can, but I can't. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. We should celebrate. Can you come over tonight? Yeah, definitely. Evan showed up with flowers. Daisies, because the florist said roses were too obvious and carnations were depressing, and Mara opened the door with tears already streaking her face. I'm being ridiculous, she said, taking the flowers. But I've wanted this for so long, and I didn't let myself believe it would actually happen. It's not ridiculous. You worked for this. I know, but... She set the flowers on the counter, turned to face him. What if I mess it up? What if the final illustrations aren't good enough? What if... Evan pulled her into a hug, cutting off the spiral. You're not going to mess it up, and even if something goes wrong, you'll figure it out. You always do. Mara pressed her face against his shoulder, and he felt her breathing slow, her body relaxing against his. How are you always so calm? I'm not. I just hide it better. She laughed, muffled against his shirt, and pulled back to look at him. Thank you for being here, for believing in me when I can't. Always. They ordered Thai food and ate it on the couch while Mara walked him through the contract details she half understood. The advance, the timeline, the marketing plan that involved social media she didn't know how to use. Evan listened and asked questions and felt a fierce pride that this person, this brilliant, talented person, had chosen to share this moment with him. Later, after the food was gone and they'd migrated to opposite ends of the couch, with their feet tangled in the middle, Mara said, I want you to meet Jenna. Evan's stomach did a small flip. Your cousin? Yeah, she keeps asking about you, and I keep making excuses, but I want you to meet her, if you're okay with that. Why wouldn't I be okay with it? Because meeting family is a thing. It means something. I know. And you're still okay with it? Evan reached over, took her hand. Yeah, I want to meet her. Mara's smile was relieved and nervous all at once. Okay, good. I'll set something up. The meeting happened 2 weeks later at a brew pub in southeast Portland, the kind of place with reclaimed wood and too many IPA options. Jenna was already there when they arrived, sitting at a high-top table near the window, and she stood when she saw them approaching. She looked like Mara, same dark hair, same sharp eyes, but where Mara was contained and careful, Jenna radiated energy that seemed barely controlled. She hugged Mara hard, then turned to Evan with an appraising look that made him feel like he was being inventoried. So you're Evan, she said. That's me. The carpenter. Framer, technically. Even better, I like specificity. She gestured to the chairs. Sit. I ordered nachos because Mara never orders enough food and then eats half of mine. That happened once, Mara protested. 3 times. I'm keeping count. They sat, and a server appeared to take drink orders. Evan got a beer he'd never heard of because Jenna recommended it. Mara got cider. Jenna got something called a sour that made Evan's mouth pucker just thinking about it. So, Jenna said once the server left, tell me your intentions with my cousin. Jenna, Mara said, her tone warning. What? It's a valid question. Evan felt his face heat, but met Jenna's eyes. To keep showing up, to be someone she can count on. Jenna studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Good answer. Simple, but good. Can we not do this? Mara asked. We're already doing it. Embrace the awkwardness. Jenna leaned back in her chair. But seriously, Evan, Mara doesn't bring people around, like, ever. So the fact that you're here means something. I know. And you're okay with that? More than okay. Jenna's expression softened slightly. Okay then. Welcome to the family, such as it is. The nachos arrived, and the conversation shifted to safer topics. Jenna's job in nonprofit fundraising, Mara's book deal, Evan's latest project involving a client who kept changing their mind about door placement. Jenna was funny and loud and asked intrusive questions with the kind of affection that made them almost charming. She told stories about Mara as a kid, shy, intense, always drawing, and Mara groaned but didn't stop her. There was this one time, Jenna said, when we were maybe 10, and Mara decided she was going to illustrate an entire encyclopedia. Just decided. Started with A, made it to C before she got bored. I didn't get bored, I got realistic about time management. You drew 47 pictures of different types of cats. Cats are important. Evan listened to them bicker with the ease of people who'd been doing it their whole lives, and felt something warm settle in his chest. This was Mara's world, and she was letting him into it. When they left the brew pub a few hours later, Jenna hugged Mara again, then surprised Evan by hugging him too. "Take care of her," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "I will." "Good." She pulled back, smiled. "And if you hurt her, I know where you work." "Noted." In the car, Mara let out a long breath. "That wasn't too terrible, was it?" "She's great." "She's a lot." "Yeah, but in a good way." Evan glanced over at her. "She loves you." "I know, sometimes too much." Mara was quiet for a moment. "Thanks for doing that. I know meeting family can be weird." "It wasn't weird. It was nice." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Mara reached over, laced her fingers through his. "You're pretty great, you know that?" "I've been told." "By who?" "You. Just now." She laughed, and Evan drove through the city streets feeling like he'd passed some test he hadn't known he was taking. March became April, and with it came the kind of spring that Portland did well, everything blooming at once, the air soft with possibility. Evan and Mara fell into rhythms that felt less like routine and more like ritual. Morning texts, Saturday park visits even when it rained, evenings at her place or occasionally at his, though Mara admitted his studio apartment made her feel claustrophobic. "It's very you," she'd said diplomatically. "Meaning small and depressing?" "Meaning minimal and focused, but yeah, also small." They started spending most of their time at her place, and Evan found himself keeping a toothbrush there, then a change of clothes, then a drawer she cleared out without being asked. It happened gradually, the way most important things did, until one day Evan realized he spent more nights at Mara's apartment than his own. "Is this okay?" he asked one morning, watching her make coffee in her narrow kitchen. "Is what okay?" "Me being here all the time. If it's too much—" Mara turned, coffee pot in hand, and looked at him like he'd said something absurd. "Evan, if it was too much, I'd tell you. I like you being here." "Yeah?" "Yeah." She poured coffee into 2 mugs, brought them over. "It feels right. You being here. It feels like how it should be." Evan took the mug, their fingers brushing, and felt that familiar warmth spread through his chest. "It does." They stood in her kitchen as morning light filtered through the windows, drinking coffee and not needing to fill the silence, and Evan thought about how 8 months ago he'd have called this impossible. Now it was just Tuesday. Work picked up as the weather improved, and Evan found himself putting in longer hours on the framing crew. Cal noticed the change in him, the way Evan showed up earlier and left later, working with a focus that bordered on obsessive. "You saving for something?" Cal asked one afternoon, watching Evan measure the same board 3 times. "Just working." "You're always working, but lately you're working like you've got a plan." Evan paused, considered. "Maybe I do." "Yeah? What kind of plan?" "I don't know yet, but I'm figuring it out." Cal nodded, asked no more questions, and Evan appreciated the restraint even as he couldn't articulate what he was planning. The truth was, he'd been thinking about the future more lately, about what came after Saturdays and sleepovers and toothbrushes and borrowed drawers, about what it meant to build something permanent with someone. In late April, Mara finished the final illustrations for her book and sent them to her editor with the kind of nervous energy that made her pace her apartment like a caged animal. "What if they hate them?" she said for the 3rd time. "They won't." "You don't know that." "You're right, but I know they're good. And I know you." Mara stopped pacing, looked at him. "How are you always so sure about things?" "I'm not. I just don't see the point in borrowing trouble before it shows up." "That's very zen of you." I'm a carpenter. We're practical. She smiled despite herself, came to sit beside him on the couch. Will you distract me? I can't handle just waiting. How should I distract you? I don't know. Tell me about your day. Tell me something true. Evan thought about it. I've been thinking about getting my own truck, a newer one. Mine's on its last legs. That's exciting. Yeah, and I've been thinking about other stuff too, bigger stuff. Like what? He hesitated, unsure how to shape the thought into words that wouldn't sound too heavy. Like what comes next? For us. Mara went very still. What do you mean? I mean, I like this, what we're doing, but I keep wondering if there's more, if you want more. What kind of more? I don't know. Moving in together, maybe? Officially. He looked at her, trying to read her expression. Unless that's too fast. I spend most of my time here anyway, and it feels like we're already doing it, and I thought maybe… Yes, Mara said. Yes? Yes. I want that. I've wanted that. She took his hand, squeezed it. I was just waiting for you to bring it up. Why didn't you? Because I was scared you'd think it was too much, too soon. It's not too soon, not for me. Mara's eyes went bright, and she leaned forward to kiss him, soft and sure. Okay then, let's do it. Let's find a place together. Yeah? Yeah. She pulled back, smiling. But somewhere bigger than your studio. I have a lot of art supplies. Noted. They spent the rest of the evening looking at apartment listings online, laughing at the terrible ones and bookmarking the possibles. It felt easy, natural, like something they'd been planning to do all along instead of something they'd just decided on a random Tuesday in April. When Evan left the next morning for work, Mara walked him to the door and kissed him goodbye in a way that felt different, more settled, more permanent. Like she was kissing someone who belonged in her life not just for now, but for always. Love you, she said, casual and certain. Evan froze, the words hitting him with unexpected force. Mara's eyes went wide. Sorry, I didn't mean to just… I meant it, but I didn't mean to say it like that. I love you too, Evan said, cutting off her spiral. Mara blinked. Yeah? Yeah, I have for a while. I just didn't know how to say it. Well, now you've said it. Now I've said it. They stood in her doorway, grinning at each other like idiots, and then Evan kissed her one more time and left for work feeling like he was floating 3 inches off the ground. Cal noticed immediately. What happened to you? He asked when Evan showed up at the site. Nothing. You're smiling. You never smile this early. I smile. Not like that. Cal studied him. This is about Mara, isn't it? Maybe. You tell her you love her? Evan felt his face heat. Maybe. Cal whooped and clapped him on the shoulder hard enough to rattle his bones. About time, man. About time. They spent May looking at apartments, a process that was equal parts exciting and exhausting. Too small, too expensive, too far from Mara's illustration workspace, too close to a highway. But they kept looking, kept imagining their lives in different spaces, and Evan found he liked the process, the planning, the dreaming, the sense that they were building towards something together. In early June, they found a place in a quiet neighborhood near Laurelhurst Park. 2 bedrooms, big windows, hardwood floors that needed refinishing but had good bones. The second bedroom was small but got perfect northern light, which Mara said was essential for her work. This is it, she said, standing in the empty living room. This feels right. Yeah, it does. They signed the lease that week and spent the next month preparing to move. Evan gave notice on his studio, packed his minimal belongings into boxes that revealed how little he'd accumulated in 25 years. Mara packed her apartment with the organized chaos of someone who owned too many art supplies and not enough storage solutions. I don't remember buying this many sketchbooks, she said, surrounded by stacks of them. How many do you have? I stopped counting at 40. That seems like a lot. I have a problem. I'm aware. Moving day came in mid-July, hot and bright. Cal showed up with his truck to help, along with Jenna and a few of Mara's friends Evan was meeting for the first time. They hauled boxes and furniture up 3 flights of stairs, took breaks to drink water and argue about the best way to position the couch, and by evening, the new apartment was full of their combined lives in cardboard boxes. Jenna left around 8, hugging them both. "This is good," she said to Mara. "You deserve this. Thanks for helping." Anytime, literally anytime you need to move heavy objects upstairs, call me. When everyone was gone and it was just the two of them surrounded by boxes, Mara turned to Evan. "We did it." "We did. It's really ours." "Yeah, it is." They stood in their new living room, their living room, and Evan felt something settle in his chest that he'd been carrying for months, maybe years, the feeling of home. Not just a place, but a person, a life they were building together. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." Mara took his hand. "Come on, let's find the box with the sheets and make the bed. I'm exhausted." They unpacked the essentials that night. Sheets, towels, toothbrushes. The coffee maker Mara insisted was non-negotiable. The rest could wait. They fell asleep in their new bedroom with boxes still stacked against the walls and the sound of unfamiliar neighbors through thin walls, and Evan thought he'd never been happier. The weeks that followed were a process of learning how to share space, how to negotiate whose books went on which shelves, how to split chores without making it weird. Mara was messy in ways Evan wasn't, leaving sketches on every surface and forgetting to put the cap back on markers. Evan was particular about the kitchen, needing things in their proper places. They learned each other's rhythms, adjusted, compromised. Some mornings Evan woke to find Mara already at her desk, working in the early light with coffee going cold beside her. Other mornings he woke to her still asleep beside him, her breathing soft and even. He learned that she talked in her sleep sometimes, fragments of conversations with people he didn't know, and that she got cold at night and stole the blankets. She learned that he woke before his alarm every time, that he made the bed every morning with hospital corners, that he couldn't function until he'd had his first cup of coffee. She learned that he was quieter when he was stressed, that he needed time alone to process things, that his love language was acts of service, fixing the leaky faucet she'd been ignoring, organizing her art supplies by color, making her tea without being asked. They learned how to fight, small fights about dishes and schedules and whose turn it was to take out the recycling. They learned how to apologize, how to give each other space, how to come back together after disagreements with the understanding that this was temporary, that they were building something stronger than the friction. In August, Mara's book entered production, and she got to see the first proof of the cover, her illustrations brought to life in vibrant color, her name on the spine. She cried when she opened the package, and Evan held her while she tried to explain through tears why this mattered so much. "I know it's just a book," she said. It's not just a book, it's your book. I didn't think this would happen for me. I thought people like me didn't get this." "People like you?" "People who," she gestured at herself, at her legs, at the wheelchair folded in the corner. "People who spend half their energy just existing in a world that wasn't built for them." Evan pulled back to look at her. "Mara, you're one of the most capable people I know. Your chair doesn't change that." "I know. Intellectually I know, but sometimes—" She stopped, wiped her eyes. "Sometimes it's hard to believe it. Then I'll believe it for you, until you can believe it yourself." She kissed him then, hard and grateful, and Evan held her and thought about how much had changed in a year, how they'd both grown, separately and together. How love wasn't about fixing each other, but about showing up, again and again, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. September arrived with cooler weather and the promise of fall. Evan and Mara settled into their apartment, their routines, their life together. The Saturdays continued, still sacred, still theirs. But now they were just part of a larger rhythm that included weekday dinners and Sunday morning coffee in bed and all the small, unremarkable moments that added up to something extraordinary. One Saturday in late September, they went back to Laurelhurst Park, to their bench by the pond. The leaves were just starting to turn, gold and red against the blue sky. They sat side by side, Mara with her sketchbook, Evan with his coffee, and watched the ducks navigate their small dramas the way they always had. "Remember the first time we came here?" Mara asked. Yeah, you drew that judgmental duck. He's still out there somewhere, probably still judging everyone. Probably. Mara set her sketchbook aside, turned to look at him. I'm glad you showed up that day, to the cafe. I almost canceled. Why didn't you? Because Jenna wouldn't let me. She said I needed to stop hiding. Mara took his hand. She was right. I'm glad she was pushy. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence, and Evan thought about how a year ago he'd been sitting on this same bench, terrified and hopeful in equal measure, trying to figure out how to talk to someone he barely knew. Now that person was his person, and this bench was just one of many places they'd claimed as theirs. I love you, Mara said. I love you too. No, I mean... She stopped, started again. I love who I am when I'm with you. I love that you see me, all of me, and don't need me to be anything else. I love that you showed up and kept showing up, even when I disappeared. I love that you're here. Evan felt his throat tighten. I'll always be here. Promise? Promise. Mara leaned against his shoulder, and Evan wrapped his arm around her, and they watched the pond shimmer in the autumn light. The ducks did their thing. People walked past with dogs and strollers. The world kept moving, and Evan and Mara sat together in the middle of it, exactly where they'd started, exactly where they belonged. Part 5. Lu Awa Tats. Viết từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện, pha hối, thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới, liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch, sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phủ. Phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3, giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man. Phần 5 giải quyết hết vấn đề và kết thúc trọn vẹn câu chuyện. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document Mashort 53. The Saturday ritual continued through October and into November, even as the weather turned cold and the park emptied of everyone except the most devoted visitors. Evan and Mara bundled up in scarves and heavy coats, brought thermoses of hot chocolate, and sat on their bench watching the pond ice over in patches. Some weeks they talked constantly. Other weeks they sat in comfortable silence, Mara sketching while Evan just existed beside her, and both felt equally perfect. One particularly cold Saturday in mid-November, Mara set down her pencil and turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. I need to tell you something, she said. Evan's stomach tightened. Okay. It's not bad. At least I don't think it's bad. But it's important. She took a breath. My publisher wants me to do a book tour next spring. 5 cities, 2 weeks, readings and signings and all that. That's amazing. Yeah, but it means being away. Being visible in a way I'm not always comfortable with. She looked down at her hands. And I'm scared. Of what? Of people staring, of questions, of having to perform being okay with my disability for strangers who want inspiration porn. Her voice went tight. Of being away from you and this and everything that feels safe. Evan reached over, took her hand. You don't have to do it if you don't want to. I know, but I want to. Does that make sense? She squeezed his fingers. I want to be brave enough to share my work. I just don't know if I am. You're the bravest person I know. I'm really not. Yeah, you are. You just don't see it. Evan shifted to face her more fully. Mara, you've spent your whole life navigating a world that wasn't built for you. You've built a career doing something you love despite everyone who probably told you it was too hard. You let me in when it would have been easier to keep hiding. That's all bravery. Mara's eyes went bright. What if I mess it up? What if I freeze or say something stupid? Or then you'll be human, and people will still love your book. He paused. And I'll be here when you get back. You're not coming with me? Do you want me to? Mara was quiet for a moment. Part of me wants you there for every second, but part of me thinks I need to do this alone, to prove to myself I can. Then do it alone. I'll be here. 2 weeks is a long time. I've waited longer. Evan smiled slightly. Remember when you disappeared for 10 days and I drew you that terrible picture? That was different. How? Because we weren't. She stopped, gestured between them. We weren't this yet. And now we are. Which means I trust you to go do your thing and come back. And you trust me to be here when you do. Mara looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. How did I get so lucky? Pretty sure I'm the lucky one. We can both be lucky. Deal. They stayed at the park until their fingers were numb despite the hot chocolate, then went back to the apartment and spent the rest of the day on the couch, under Mara's terrible aunt-made blanket, watching movies and eating pizza and not talking about the tour. It would come when it came. For now, this was enough. December arrived with the kind of cold that made Evan grateful for the apartment's decent heating. He and Mara decorated for the holidays. A small tree that Mara insisted on covering with handmade ornaments, string lights along the windows, a wreath on the door that smelled like pine and cinnamon. It was the first time Evan had decorated for anything in years, and he found he liked it more than he expected. You're being very festive, Mara observed, watching him hang lights with the precision of someone measuring a load-bearing wall. I'm being thorough. You measured the spacing between each hook. I like symmetry. You're adorable. Evan felt his face heat but didn't argue. He'd learned over the past months that Mara's affection often came wrapped in gentle mockery, and he'd grown to appreciate it as its own kind of intimacy. They spent the holidays quietly, just the two of them. Mara's parents were in Florida visiting her aunt, and Evan's mom was in Arizona with the pickleball boyfriend, so they made their own traditions. Christmas morning in pajamas, exchanging small gifts, a set of high-quality pencils for Mara, a book on Japanese joinery for Evan. They cooked dinner together, Evan handling the technical aspects while Mara provided commentary and occasionally helpful suggestions. You're very serious about this turkey, Mara said, watching him check the temperature for the third time. I don't want to poison us. It's been in the oven for 4 hours. I think we're safe. Better safe than sorry. The turkey turned out perfect, and they ate at their small dining table with candles Mara had insisted on, and wine that was probably too expensive for a random Tuesday, but perfect for Christmas. Afterward, they sat on the couch with the tree lights glowing and talked about everything and nothing until Mara fell asleep against his shoulder. Evan sat there holding her, feeling the weight of her trust, and thought about how 1.5 years ago he'd been alone in his studio apartment thinking this was all his life would ever be. Now he had this person, this home, this quiet joy that felt like the opposite of loneliness. He kissed the top of Mara's head gently, careful not to wake her, and made a promise to himself that he'd never take this for granted. The new year came with the kind of optimism that felt both fragile and necessary. Mara's book was scheduled for release in March, with the tour following in April. She threw herself into preparation, writing talking points, practicing her reading voice, ordering business cards that felt both official and terrifying. Evan watched her oscillate between excitement and panic, and learned when to offer encouragement and when to just hold her. What if nobody comes to the readings? She asked one night in late January, pacing their living room. Then you'll read to an empty room and it'll be good practice. That's not comforting. I'm being realistic. I don't want realistic. I want reassurance. Evan stood, caught her hands, stopped her pacing. Okay. People will come. They'll love your book. They'll ask thoughtful questions. You'll be brilliant. Better? Marginally. I'll take it. She leaned against him and he wrapped his arms around her, feeling the tension in her shoulders. I'm being ridiculous, aren't I? You're being scared. That's different. I don't like being scared. Nobody does. But you're doing it anyway. That's the bravery part. Mara pulled back to look at him. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just weren't paying attention. She smiled despite herself, kissed him softly. Thank you. For what? For being you, for making this easier. Always. February brought rain and more preparation. Mara's agent sent her the final tour schedule: Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, San Diego. 5 cities, 11 events, 2 weeks away from home. Evan helped her pack, folding clothes with the same precision he brought to framing walls, making sure she had everything she needed. You're very good at this, Mara said, watching him organize her suitcase. I worked retail in high school. They trained us on proper folding techniques. Of course they did. The night before she left, they lay in bed not sleeping, both too aware of the imminent separation. Evan traced patterns on Mara's shoulder while she talked about her fears. What if she froze? What if people asked invasive questions about her disability? What if the whole thing was a disaster? Then it'll be a disaster and you'll survive it, Evan said, and I'll be here when you get back. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Promise? Promise. Mara shifted closer, tucked her head under his chin. I'm going to miss you. I'm going to miss you too. 2 weeks feels like forever. It'll go fast. You're lying. Yeah, I am. She laughed softly, and they lay there in the dark holding each other, and Evan tried to memorize the feeling, the weight of her against him, the rhythm of her breathing, the way she fit perfectly in the space beside him. The next morning, he drove her to the airport. They didn't talk much during the drive, both caught up in their own thoughts. At the departure drop-off, Evan helped her with her bags, then pulled her into a hug that lasted longer than was probably appropriate for a busy airport curb. You've got this, he said. I hope so. I know so. She kissed him, hard and certain, then pulled away and grabbed her suitcase. I love you. I love you too. Evan watched her walk into the terminal, watched until she disappeared into the crowd, then drove home through morning traffic, feeling the absence of her like a physical thing. The apartment felt too quiet without Mara in it. Evan went to work, came home, made dinner for one, and tried not to count the hours until she'd be back. They texted constantly, Mara sending updates from each city, photos of bookstores and hotel rooms and audiences that weren't empty rooms after all. People came, people asked questions. Some of the questions were invasive, but Mara handled them with grace. Evan could see even through her written words. Mara: Seattle was good. 50 people showed up. Evan: That's amazing. Mara: Someone asked me how I overcame my disability to write a book. Evan: What did you say? Mara: I said I didn't overcome anything. I just wrote a book, disability and all. Evan: Perfect answer. Mara: I'm learning. On day 5, Mara called him from her hotel in San Francisco, her voice tired but animated. There was a little girl at the signing today, she said. Maybe 7 or 8. She had the same kind of wheelchair I use sometimes. And she asked me if she could be an artist too. What did you tell her? I told her she could be anything she wanted. And I signed her book to a future illustrator. And her mom cried, and I almost cried, and it was... Mara's voice broke slightly. It was the best moment of this whole tour. Evan felt his chest tighten. You're changing lives, Mara. I don't know about that. I do. They talked for another hour, until Mara's exhaustion caught up with her, and she admitted she needed to sleep. Evan lay in their bed alone that night, thinking about that little girl, about what it meant to see yourself reflected in someone else's success, about how Mara probably didn't realize how important she was becoming. The days crawled by. Evan worked longer hours than necessary, had dinner with Cal and his wife, cleaned the apartment until it was spotless, and counted down to Mara's return. On day 13, she called from Los Angeles sounding exhausted and homesick. One more event tomorrow, then I fly home, she said. How are you holding up? I'm tired. I miss our bed. I miss you. I miss you too. 2 more days. I know. Evan? Yeah? Thank you for pushing me to do this, for believing I could. You did it yourself. But you believed in me when I couldn't. Always will. When Mara's flight landed at PDX 2 days later, Evan was waiting at arrivals with the kind of nervous energy he hadn't felt since their first coffee date. He saw her before she saw him, rolling her suitcase with one hand, looking tired and rumpled and perfect. When her eyes found his, her whole face lit up. She dropped her suitcase and walked into his arms, and Evan held her like she might disappear if he let go. Hi, she said against his shoulder. Hi, welcome home. It's good to be home. They stood there in the middle of the arrivals area while people flowed around them, and Evan thought about how 2 weeks ago he'd watched her walk away, And now she was back, and this was what love was: the going and the returning, the trust that the other person would be there when you needed them. In the car, Mara told him about the final event, a packed bookstore in San Diego, a reading that went well, a Q&A where someone asked intelligent questions about her illustration process instead of her disability. It was perfect, she said. The whole tour was hard, but perfect. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of me too. She reached over, took his hand. But I'm glad it's over. I'm glad to be home with you. Me too. They spent the rest of that day and the next recovering, Mara catching up on sleep, Evan making her favorite foods, both of them existing in their apartment like people who'd been separated and were relearning how to share space. It felt easy and necessary all at once. On Sunday morning, Mara suggested they go to the park. Our bench? Evan asked. Our bench. It was early April, the kind of spring day that felt like a promise. The park was full of people enjoying the good weather, joggers, families, the Tai Chi guy, who was apparently a permanent fixture. Evan and Mara walked to their bench by the pond and sat in their usual spots, close enough to touch. I've been thinking, Mara said. About what? About us. About this. She gestured at the bench, the pond, the space between them. About how a year and a half ago, I almost didn't show up to that cafe because I was scared. I'm glad you showed up. Me too. She turned to face him. I'm glad you showed up too. Every single time. Even when I disappeared. Even when I was difficult. You're not difficult. I am sometimes, but you stay anyway. Because I love you. I know. And I love you. Mara took a breath. And I've been thinking about what comes next. Evan's heart picked up speed. What comes next? I don't know exactly, but I know I want it to be with you. All of it. Whatever it is. Me too. Yeah? Yeah. Evan reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box he'd been carrying for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. Actually, I've been thinking about what comes next too. Mara's eyes went wide. Evan? Wait, let me... He opened the box, revealing a simple silver ring with a small stone that caught the light. I'm not good at speeches, but I'm good at showing up. And I want to keep showing up for you, every day, for as long as you'll have me. So, he took a breath. Will you marry me? Mara's hands flew to her mouth, tears already streaming down her face. Are you serious? Very serious. We've only been together a year and a half. I know. That's not very long. I know that too. Evan, you don't have to answer now, or today, or this week. I just wanted you to know that this is where I'm at, that I'm all in, that I... Yes, Mara said. Evan blinked. Yes? Yes, obviously yes. She laughed through her tears. You beautiful, patient, ridiculous man. Of course, yes. Evan's hand shook as he took the ring from the box and slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. He had borrowed one of her rings to get the size, a covert operation that had involved more stress than any framing project, and looked exactly right on her hand. Mara stared at it, then at him, then launched herself into his arms hard enough to nearly knock them both off the bench. Evan caught her, held her, felt her crying and laughing against his shoulder all at once. I can't believe you proposed on our bench, she said. Where else would I do it? I don't know. Somewhere fancy? This is fancy, to me. She pulled back to look at him, her face wet with tears, but smiling so wide it looked like it hurt. I love you so much. I love you too. They kissed there on the bench while ducks did their thing and joggers passed and the world kept moving. And Evan thought about how this was where it all started. This bench, this park, this person who'd walked into his life and changed everything. We should call Jenna, Mara said eventually. Now? She'll kill me if I wait. Okay. Mara pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed. Jenna picked up on the second ring. Hey, what's? I'm engaged, Mara blurted out. There was a pause, then a scream loud enough that Evan could hear it from where he sat. What? When? How? Where are you? The park, our bench. He just asked, and I said yes, and I'm coming over, right now. Don't move. Jenna, you don't have to. I'm already in my car, See you in 20 minutes. The line went dead. Mara looked at her phone, then at Evan. She's coming over, I gathered. She's going to interrogate you about your intentions again. I have a ring this time. That should help. Mara laughed, tucked herself against his side. This is really happening. Yeah, it is. We're getting married. We are. Evan Mercer and Mara Ellison. Or Mara Mercer, or Evan Ellison, or we keep our names, whatever you want. I like Mara Mercer. She tested it out. Yeah, that sounds right. They sat there for a while longer, just the two of them, before Jenna arrived and the celebration began in earnest. But in that quiet moment on their bench, Evan memorized the feeling. Mara's weight against his side, the ring on her finger catching the sunlight, the certainty that this was exactly where he was supposed to be. The engagement shifted something, made everything feel both more permanent and more immediate. They started planning in the tentative way people do when they're not sure what they're planning for, small wedding or big, summer or fall, traditional or something else entirely. Mara wanted flowers everywhere. Evan wanted good food. Beyond that, they were flexible. I just want people we love, Mara said one night, scrolling through venue options on her laptop. I don't want a spectacle. Sounds perfect. You're very agreeable about this. Because I don't care about the details. I just care about marrying you. Mara closed her laptop, smiled at him. That's a good answer. They settled on October, a year and a half after they'd met. Small ceremony at a garden venue, dinner after with close friends and family, simple and intentional and theirs. The planning happened in the margins of their regular life, work and Saturdays and evenings at home. Mara's book continued to sell well, earning out its advance and then some. She got offers for 2 more books, which she accepted with the kind of confidence Evan loved seeing in her. I'm a professional author now, she said, slightly awed. You've always been a professional author. Yeah, but now I have contracts and deadlines and everything. Fancy. Very fancy. Summer came with heat that made the apartment stuffy and the park crowded. They still went to their bench most Saturdays, still sat and talked and existed together. Sometimes they brought Jenna, who'd become a fixture in their lives in the way family does. Sometimes it was just the two of them. Either way felt right. In July, Evan got a promotion at work, lead framer on a new development project, more money and more responsibility. Cal threw him a small party at his house, and Mara came wearing a dress Evan had never seen before and charmed everyone without trying. She's good people, Cal said, watching Mara laugh at something his wife said. You did good, Mercer. I know. You nervous about the wedding? Not really. Not even a little? No, I'm excited. That's good. That's how it should be. Cal clapped him on the shoulder. Happy for you, man. Really. The wedding preparations intensified as October approached. Dress fittings and suit rentals and tastings at the catering company. Mara got stressed about details, seating arrangements and timing and whether people would have fun. Evan reminded her that people who loved them would have fun no matter what, and she'd relax for a while before finding something new to worry about. What if it rains, she asked a week before the wedding. Then we'll get wet. That's not a plan. The venue has a covered area. We'll use it. But the photos will be beautiful no matter what, because you'll be in them. Mara stopped mid-pace, looked at him. You're very smooth when you want to be. I'm just honest. I know. That's what makes it smooth. The week before the wedding, Evan's mom flew in from Arizona. She met Mara for the first time over dinner at their apartment, and Evan watched them bond over a shared love of terrible reality TV and strong opinions about proper tea brewing. I like her, his mom said later, helping Evan clean up while Mara was in the bathroom. She's good for you. I know. You're happy. Yeah, I am. His mom hugged him, hard and sudden. I'm proud of you. Your dad would be too. Mom, I know you don't talk about him, but he would be. You grew up good, Evan. You grew up kind. Evan felt his throat tighten but didn't pull away. Thanks, Mom. The night before the wedding, Evan stayed at Cal's house per tradition, while Mara stayed at the apartment with Jenna. He lay in Cal's guest room staring at the ceiling and feeling the kind of nervous excitement that made sleep impossible. His phone buzzed. Mara. You awake? Evan. Yeah, Mara. Me too. Can't sleep. Evan. Nervous? Mara. Excited, but also nervous. Is that normal? Evan. Probably. Mara. Are you nervous? Evan. No, I'm ready. Mara. Yeah, me too. Evan. See you tomorrow. Mara. See you tomorrow. I love you. Evan. I love you too. The wedding day arrived clear and perfect, the kind of October day that Portland did well when it felt like cooperating. Evan got ready at Cal's house with hands that shook slightly when he tied his tie. Cal had to redo it twice before it looked right. You good? Cal asked. Yeah, great. You look like you might throw up. I'm not going to throw up. Just saying, if you need to, the bathroom's right there. Evan didn't throw up. He got to the venue early, stood at the front of the small garden space they'd rented, and waited. Guests arrived. Friends from work, Mara's illustration colleagues, family members Evan was meeting for the first time. Jenna sat in the front row looking emotional already, which made Evan smile. Then the music started, and Mara appeared. She walked down the aisle on her own, slowly and deliberately, wearing a simple white dress that moved around her like water. Her hair was down, loose around her shoulders. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers. She was smiling so wide it looked like it hurt, and Evan felt his chest crack open with how much he loved her. When she reached him, she took his hands, and he felt her trembling slightly. Hi, she said. Hi. You look beautiful. You clean up pretty well yourself. The officiant, a friend of Jenna's who'd gotten ordained online specifically for this, cleared his throat. Shall we begin? The ceremony was short and sweet. They'd written their own vows, simple promises about showing up and staying honest and building a life together one day at a time. Evan's voice shook when he spoke his, and Mara cried through hers, but they both got through it. When the officiant said he could kiss his bride, Evan cupped Mara's face gently and kissed her like it was the first time and the 1,000th time all at once. People cheered. Someone whistled, probably Cal. Mara laughed against his mouth, and Evan thought he'd never been happier. The reception was exactly what they'd wanted. Good food, people they loved, no pressure to perform anything except joy. They had their first dance to a song Mara had picked, something slow and sweet that Evan had practiced to in their living room for weeks. He held her close and tried not to step on her feet, and she laughed and told him he was doing fine. We did it, she said. We did. We're married. We are. Evan Mercer, husband. Mara Mercer, wife. She smiled up at him. That sounds right. They danced and ate and talked to everyone who'd come to celebrate with them. Jenna gave a toast that made everyone cry and laugh in equal measure. Cal gave one that was mostly inappropriate but ended with genuine affection. Evan's mom hugged Mara and welcomed her to the family officially. As the evening wound down and guests started to leave, Evan and Mara snuck away to the garden where they'd said their vows. The space was empty now, fairy lights still glowing softly in the growing dark. This was perfect, Mara said, leaning against him. Yeah, it was. I'm glad we did it our way. Me too. They stood there in the quiet, and Evan thought about everything that had led to this moment. The blind date he'd agreed to just to shut Cal up, the bench by the pond, the coffee shops and winter markets, and all the small moments that had added up to a life. Mara had changed everything, had taken his quiet, contained world and filled it with color and noise and love. What are you thinking about? Mara asked. Just this, us. How lucky I am. We're both lucky. Yeah, we are. They went home that night to their apartment, now officially theirs in a way it hadn't been before. They changed out of their wedding clothes and into pajamas and sat on their couch under the terrible blanket eating leftover wedding cake straight from the box. Best day ever, Mara said, chocolate frosting on her lip. Best day ever, Evan agreed. What do we do now? What do you mean? I mean, what comes next? We've done the wedding. What's the next chapter? Evan thought about it. I don't know, but I know we'll figure it out together. Good answer. Mara set down her cake, curled into his side. I love you, husband. I love you too, wife. The seasons turned as seasons do. Fall became winter, became spring. Evan and Mara settled into married life, which turned out to be remarkably similar to unmarried life except for the rings and the way people's eyes lit up when they said, "my husband," or "my wife." They still did Saturdays at the park when weather allowed. They still argued about dishes and made up quickly. They still learned each other in small increments, discovering new facets the way you discover rooms in a familiar house. Mara's second book came out and did even better than the first. She did another tour, shorter this time, and Evan went with her to San Francisco because she asked and because he wanted to. They held hands at her reading, and he watched her field questions with the confidence of someone who'd done this before, who knew her worth. Evan took on bigger projects at work, started thinking about eventually starting his own framing company. Mara encouraged him, helped him plan, believed in him the way he'd always believed in her. They talked about buying a house someday, maybe having kids someday, maybe getting a dog definitely soon. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise, and the kind of ordinary joy that came from choosing each other every single day. One Saturday in June, they sat on their bench by the pond watching the ducks navigate their eternal dramas. The sun was warm, the water sparkled, and Evan felt the kind of contentment that didn't need words. "Remember when you drew me that terrible picture?" Mara said. "How could I forget? You remind me every few months. It's important. It was the moment I knew." "Knew what?" "That you weren't going anywhere, that you'd wait." She took his hand. "That you saw me. I still see you. I know. That's why we're here." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad you showed up to that coffee date." "Me too. Even though Cal forced you into it?" "Especially because Cal forced me into it." They sat in comfortable silence, and Evan thought about how 2 years ago his life had been simple and quiet and small. Now it was complicated and loud and expansive in the best possible ways. Mara had done that. Love had done that. The choice to keep showing up had done that. "Hey, Evan," Mara said. "Yeah?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For everything. For being patient. For loving me through the hard parts. For building this life with me." Evan kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for letting me." They stayed at the park until the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Then they walked home together, hand in hand, to the life they'd built and the life they were still building, one small moment at a time. The bench stayed. So did the ducks. So did the park and the pond and all the places they'd claimed as theirs. And Evan and Mara stayed too, together, always together, exactly as they'd promised they would be.